I want to shalom and salam to again, brothers and sisters. Your brother Yifdea, Johannes Welda Manuel, Jifdi, and just wanted to come to the again and just expounding a little bit more on the languages and linguistical studies that the really have brought forward. And again, I say I've been learning so much again, just practicing and putting a discipline on I and I self to really focus a lot more on much of the languages because it is just an interesting study in itself to see the correlations between so many languages and even some of the quote unquote offshoots of many of these languages that ones would speak, especially amongst black, brown peoples, which we know as today or how they referred to, and how certain manners of speech just seem to find their way into the mainstream media or the mainstream world, or day-to-day living. And, certain people seem to get it, certain people don't, or it takes them a moment to actually comprehend much of what's being said by another one who seems to be speaking in a manner that's not so much accepted, by the majority of people, especially within a particular set of rules of language or grammar, as so to speak, or grammatical congruency in which ones would speak in a certain particular sector of society. So I had to expound on that a bit more because I kept seeing a lot of these instances continue to pop up in I and I's daily life. And again, I was just around, I and I earthly, I and I own, familial ties and family, amongst I and I mother and father, grandfathers, from both sides of the family. Of course, from one side of my family, my mother's side of the family, and my grandfather has passed some time ago, but I do remember certain, aspects of the way in which he spoke. And it's not a secret, amongst, much of I and I family, especially those on Rastafari Groundation, those who tune into us, of course, on our blogtalkradio.com, on our DSR Discipleship Radio. Be sure to check us out there. But, it's not a secret amongst, I and I brothers, and, even amongst, my brethren, Wyndham Yadden as well, that most of our ties lead us, especially as lost sheep, the House of Israel, or Afro-American peoples here in the North Country, and even amongst the Caribbean as well, that most of our ties lead us down south. But speaking specifically to those Afro-Americans here, most of our ties lead us, to the deep south, or what they know as the southeastern states here in the United States of America. So a lot of what the brother brings out from many of the teachings, especially when we get really deep into it about the Gullah peoples and the Oromo peoples, even relating this to much of what's going on in modern Ethiopia today. But we'll save that, of course, for a second edition in this video. But sticking to the point of the Oromo peoples or the Galla people, from what they were called from such a time, had a very distinct connection, with the Gullah peoples here of the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, some parts of Virginia, so on and so forth, and maybe even eastern Tennessee. To that perspective, and just even so funny that, this hurricane season starts with, another category 4 or 5 Hurricane Matthew. We're here in the year of Matthew, or Yezeminat, Yezemine Mateos Wingalawi, or the year of Matthew, of course, and we reference that from Ethiopia Kingdom of God Services, or EthiopiaKingdomofGod.org, from the Nebuchadnezzar Id Artemis Kabeda Welde Jesus. But again, just another interesting point. Yeah, just continues to come through much of what's being placed in front of my site here, I continue to just see more and more things come out further and further, and really need to do more study on that just to see what else may be found. But keeping to that, the point that I was bringing out about the Gullah, or the Galla peoples, the Geechee peoples, here from the states, or the North American continent, had a very distinct relationship with the Galla peoples, or what they were called Galla, from that time, in which we know as the Oromo peoples of modern Ethiopia today. Now, what was really interesting was getting into a lot of the manners of speech that most of these peoples really adhered to, or the adherence in which they put forward in their manners of speech. Now, in modern Ethiopia today, the Oromo people speak Oromifa. They don't speak so much Amharic or Amharic, most prevalently as you would find it from the peoples of the Amhara region, the Amarawian, or the Tigray, and even more so the ones of Tigra. They mostly speak Tigrinya. Some would say matters of speech in different modes of Tigrinya. And, I've heard some very, just funny off the wall type pronunciations of Tigras, but Tigrinya is the matter of linguistics, or the dialect of Ethiopic, which peoples of Tigra would actually speak. And more so as a national language, Amharic or Amharic has become the national recognized, or the state legislated language of the entire country. And so, but even having the Oromo, who are more so I guess you would say, the most populous or the most numerous ethnic group amongst those all in Ethiopia. As you have Somali, also you have Amara, you have Tigray, you have the southern peoples, which they are more nomadic and more village people. Towards the south, more Cushitic also. And once get into certain studies in that. But the Oromo are the most numerous, but they speak Oromifa. Some may speak Amharic to a certain extent, especially, getting into certain levels of government positions, or certain levels of business in which, ones are actually seeking to find some upward mobility in some shape, form, or fashion. But prevalently, the most majority speak Oromifa. I found that even more so prevalent here on these shores, as the peoples of the Gullah Geechee relations, or those of the Carolinas, and those who, of course, passed through the transatlantic slave trade, have manners of speech in their own sense. And even so, relating this a lot to the whole Nate Parker rendition and rehashing, and the film production of Birth of a Nation. And it definitely relates a lot to the practices of many, of our peoples from that time, when they were actually forced, to speak another language. And, some may have interfaced with it from a certain perspective, especially from historical aspects. But of course, that's also for another video. But, in which they finally came to an understanding, subtly, of having a grasp on the English language. Of course, they didn't speak it in ways that ones who forcibly taught them to speak that way. They found modes and ways in which they spoke it in their own manners, of course, in their own circles, and of course, with many ones having, their desire for liberation and freedom, and throwing off the yoke of slavery, they found ways in their manners of speech in which they could convey messages to each other, and put those to practice and fulfillment in many aspects of their lives, as many escaped African peoples or peoples of African descent from that time, especially here on the North Shores and the Caribbean, and so on and so forth, even so forth down to Central America and South America as well, found ways in which they could convey many messages, whether it be physical, linguistically, or telepathically, just by certain eye looks, or and not just to give the whole thing away for ones to actually go and study these things, because it of course comes through in many of the narratives as well. But we find it very prevalent amongst the languages and the linguistical studies. Even towards today, there was a big, I guess you can say, squabble or intellectual fleet between many ones, in the Afro-American community and, of course, the American community at large, in which many ones had struggled with speaking the English language properly, quote unquote, to many ones of mainstream media and mainstream pop culture, and you could say, especially amongst the Afro Americans here on the North Shores, and even today, there's still a very heavy and prevalent notion of that initial, yeah, I guess you could say squabble or so. Even to this day, many ones still remember, especially of my age, remember the times in which many peoples would, make a mockery of many Afro Americans and the manners in which they spoke, and still to this day as well, as Ebonics, calling it, coining it as Ebonics, and I really even found that interesting in and of itself, as we, of course, a Rastafari groundation, these Ethiopian Hebrews and Hebrew-minded like peoples seem to see the Afro-Americans and, of course, others, Native Americans, certain Native Americans, and other Hispanic brothers and sisters of that nature as well, seem to have many ties toward Hebrew peoples and speaking Hebraically in the language. The peoples would be known as Ibriy, and here they kind of make a mockery, but kind of tell the truth without you actually seeing it if you're not paying attention. Even from many of the older newspaper articles and clippings in which we have found, we're still studying, and I really would love a chance to find more valid newspaper articles and things of that nature, especially from many of the other slaveholders, in which they would attempt to apprehend many of the escaped slaves, especially those that utilized the quote-unquote underground railroad, other Negro spirituals, in which they used to convey many messages, speaking the language which they were forced to speak, but utilizing it in a manner linguistically to where they would only understand it, from person of African descent to another person of African descent, conveying them through songs and, other lyrical renditions and, things of manner in which it would seem that nothing was going on the surface, but subliminally there was a lot going on. There was a lot being said from person to person or from group to group. And it was just a very interesting story in and of itself. And many ones have, interfaced with, these certain narratives from a certain perspective and brought them about and spoken on them extensively. But, just revisiting that again, because I found it, just so prevalent in my own life. And even before mentioning my own life, and just to show another example, you have even in South America, amongst many peoples of African descent, and people, tend to forget this, that the African art form, and yes, it's an African influenced art form because it came from African peoples, capoeira in South America, especially Brazil. Capoeira was on the surface seem to be a form of entertainment for many South Americans, you would say, or peoples of African descent who passed through this the transatlantic slave trade of that particular region. It seemed to be entertainment for those slaveholders in that region, but of course, subliminally, it was actually an art form in which it even survives today in the form of mixed martial arts. So, which ones, of course, will probably be watching the the bouts and the fights tonight of the MMA and the octagon, the squared revitalized boxing ring of mixed martial arts and things of that nature, even today, and that's really survived from things of old, like capoeira. Capoeira was a form where it seemed that it was entertainment in which ones were dancing, but actually they were practicing forms of self-defense, and that was prevalent amongst those who passed through that slave trade there in South America, and of course still survives today. It's been shown to be a very good form of discipline for many ones-on-ones, especially those of the youth, and I think even the teacher, very prevalent brother, Boagente. He still survives and teaches that method of discipline and that form of martial arts as really a code of ethics amongst those still in South America, especially around, I think that's Salvador Bahia, and even funny more to say that I think even from some of my older studies they mentioned Salvador Bahia to be known as La Negro Roma. So and really showing that that the prevalence is still there, and they have a La Negro Roma because of the prevalence of Roman Catholicism still survives there, and of course that through the passing of the slave trade and that mode of Christianity and being forced on ones and ones. But of course we know that even from ancient times, Rome of course was a quote unquote black state. So La Negra Roma, or Black Rome, is very prevalent and dubious to one extent, but on the other hand, it is still very very pungent ties from a historical perspective to the modern one in which we see today. So I always tend to look at things in a certain duality, and not so much on the Freemasonic type tip, but there's always two sides to a story, so to speak. So more so in a lawful manner, I would say. And just looking at that, just a very interesting point. Even amongst in Central America and the Caribbean, amongst Hispanic speaking brothers and sisters, it's always been known amongst those ones and ones that they don't speak Spanish. In which ones would speak Spanish from the country of Spain in Europe. That's always been very prevalent, and they had so even a movement amongst those brothers and sisters where they would quote unquote say they were speaking Spanglish, or I think that was more so of the younger ones, the youth who had of course been born, of course, here in North America, but with Hispanic ties from those in Central America, so where they really became more so bilingual, speaking English and Spanish. So, of course, amongst the mainstream world, they would speak more English, but of course, with heavy accents and still showing their familial ties. The Spanish speaking linguistical renditions of, or the manners of speech in which they spoke, continued to come out, even when they were speaking in English. And even some of the English was able to creep into much of their Spanish speaking when they returned to their families, and just having certain, gatherings as families do. So that was just a really interesting point on, just those three regions here in the West in which we have those who have many African ties or those of Hebraic ties, just continuing in this mode of study in which we continue to bring out. But again, just to the main point, I found it so prevalent amongst my own family ties, especially, and seeking that solidarity with I and brother Wyndham Yadden as well, because I know that the brother has mentioned so many times that his familial ties, of course, lead him to the Carolinas as well, South and North Carolina, I think, respectively. And of course, I and I, of course, have ties there in that region as well, though many, of course, have spread out since, here in the deep southeastern region, and even more so to certain parts of the Southwest and, of course, the West Coasts and other ones to the Midwest, and, kind of scattered out all over here in North America. But, the root, of course, leading us here to the southeastern regions. And of course, just relating that with the Oromo peoples of today, in which they would call the Galla, of yesterday or sometime past, and the Gullah and the Geechee peoples here of the North American shores. We found that those manners of speech kind of really tied in to a lot of themes. Even so with Jamaican patois. I found that so many ones have so much trouble, and they voice their opinions a lot, so that way we're able to really take an account of what they say on many aspects. Even I and I mother had spoken on that, and I father as well, because I and I grandfather, of course, spoke in those manners of Gullah or Geechee or Ebonics, as ones would say. Him even just having and many ones like him himself having eighth grade education, or some even reaching the height of a 12th grade education or high school education, high school diploma, and they still even, were more wise in their day and even today still than many ones who have college degrees and, very astute degrees as well, because they had a certain amount of wisdom and prevalence, I would say, more so toward their morality first, and just a common sense in many other aspects. So even just to say that, like, ones will still see it today, many ones who are very, very book smart and aren't always very commonsensical or very smart in, everyday manners, or, some would say street smarts as well, and just throwing that in for a little bit of supplementary topical matters, just to bring about an understanding of what I and I is trying to convey here. But we saw that very prevalent amongst I and I own family, and we saw that many manners of speech in which the Jamaican patois and many other Creoles of the Caribbean, and the manners in which they spoke, especially if they had a prevalency toward the English, but they spoke English in their own patois or Creole or mix of manners of speech. We, coming from the South and having those Southern ties, didn't have as much trouble understanding a lot of what was being conveyed through many of the Southern speakers, or ones where you knew they were from deep down South, or those from the Caribbean, or those of other patois, and even speaking toward the mode of IT, and which they say many ones speak Haitian Creole. They say, well, they speak Creole, but if you actually listen to a lot of the words that they speak in the Creole, it's more so a Franco Ebonics, quote unquote, so to speak, just to throw that out there for ones, especially, if you're one who speaks French fluently, or you're one studying French, I encourage you to take a look at the manners of speech in Haitian Creole and other aspects of the Caribbean in which one speak French in a different manner from which mainland France would speak French or the French language. because we found that to be such an interesting point and just showing and solidifying a lot of the historical ties from which have been conveyed from earlier messages up until today in this day and time. So we just found that just to be a very, very interesting point, and it really shines through with my own life today as I found myself, delving into many languages all at one time, and really seeking to understand as much as I can from as many languages as I can possibly put on myself, or really put the discipline on myself to learn and grow in that manner. So just to put that out there for the family, and really show and prove just certain points and explain as best as I can, why certain things are the way they are, and why certain things seem to have a certain flow to them, and why certain people seem to be able to understand certain things from other people's a little bit quicker, or at a more rapid pace than others, is because there's more relative ties to certain aspects of their culture than other ones would obviously have, and that's why they seem to have, a certain level of difficulty, especially in the initial sense, than other ones would, because certain aspects of their culture kind of meshes with said culture that they're trying to understand. So I just put that forward because it just continued to come up in I and I's life, and just my day-to-day walk. And I just wanted to really put that forward to ones, so, feel no way if, it takes you a moment to grasp certain subjects. It just pertains to a certain level of discipline. And ones really need to take that to heart, and, really mull that over and think on those points, and, reassess, their approaches to certain aspects, especially when they're interfacing with certain things such as language, because language, of course, in and of itself, takes you to certain levels of education that you really wouldn't interface with on a day-to-day basis. So we just put that forward for many ones, especially those continuing to learn the languages and learn culture in that aspect, because language in many aspects is the key to culture.